The rain came down like a curtain of silver needles, soaking the California highway in an unrelenting downpour. Cars crawled slowly, their headlights cutting through the mist as thunder cracked in the distance. It was one of those nights that made the world feel heavier, quieter, like even the sky had something sorrowful to say. Keanu Reeves sat behind the wheel of his modest black truck, not far from the coastline. He wasn't in a rush. He rarely was. Years of fame had taught him that time wasn't to be chased, it was to be respected. So he drove at his own pace, thoughtful eyes scanning the winding road ahead. He had been visiting a retired stuntman friend in Big Sur, someone who had once doubled for him in a forgotten film, but had become family over the years. The man had cancer, and Keanu had spent the past 3 days helping him build a wheelchair ramp for his cabin. Simple work. Real work. The rhythmic slap of his windshield wipers barely kept up with the rain. He leaned forward slightly, squinting as he turned a bend near a steep embankment. That's when he saw it. The car was upside down in a shallow ditch, one side crushed, its frame twisted like crumpled foil. Steam hissed from the hood. The rear wheels were still spinning. Instinct took over. Keanu slammed on the brakes, skidding, slightly as his tires fought the wet asphalt. His heartbeat kicked up, but his hands were steady as he pulled over, hazard lights blinking behind him like a warning beacon. He grabbed a flashlight and his phone and jumped out. Rain pelted him instantly, soaking through his jacket. The world outside was chaos. Wind, water, and a faint smell of burning rubber. As he reached the wreck, he called 911, shouting over the wind. "There's a crash on Highway 19, just past mile marker 78. One vehicle overturned. Someone's inside. Send help now." The dispatcher's calm voice replied, but Keanu had already dropped the phone into his pocket. He crouched by the smashed window, peering inside. A woman was slumped against the steering wheel, motionless. Her dark hair clung to her face, streaked with blood. The airbag hadn't deployed. That meant she took the full brunt of the impact. "Hey!" he called out, voice steady but urgent. "Can you hear me?" No response. He yanked on the door, but it wouldn't budge. Jammed. His eyes scanned the interior. Smoke. Maybe fire soon. He didn't have minutes, he had seconds. With a quick look at the surrounding trees, he spotted a fallen branch thick enough to use as leverage. Dragging it over, he wedged it beneath the crushed doorframe and pushed with everything he had. His muscles screamed. The rain poured. The wood cracked under pressure, but so did the door. It gave enough for him to reach inside. The seatbelt had twisted around her neck and chest, almost strangling her. He fumbled for the buckle, heart thudding louder than the storm. It clicked open. She slid forward, unconscious. Gently, he pulled her out, cradling her in his arms like glass. As he lifted her from the wreckage, flames suddenly sparked beneath the engine. The fire licked upward, greedy and bright against the storm. Keanu turned and ran, shielding her from the heat with his own body. He reached the truck, opened the back seat, and laid her down on a blanket he always kept for emergencies. He didn't know her name. He didn't know if she'd make it. But in that moment, he made a silent promise. She wouldn't be alone. The ambulance took 15 minutes to arrive. In that time, Keanu sat with her, hand gently holding hers, speaking softly even though she couldn't hear. Her wrist was broken. A nasty gash ran across her scalp. But her breathing was shallow and steady. When the medics arrived, they didn't recognize him at first. Soaked and muddy, he looked like any other bystander who had done the right thing. But when the driver glanced closer, his eyes widened. Are you Keanu Reeves?" Keanu nodded slightly, brushing the question aside. "She's in shock, broken wrist, might have internal bleeding. Please be gentle." They lifted her onto a stretcher, securing her as gently as they could. Just before the doors closed, one of the medics asked, "Do you know her name?" Keanu shook his head. "No, but I want to." He followed them to the hospital in his truck, never going over the speed limit but never losing sight of the flashing red and blue lights ahead. When they reached the emergency entrance, he parked and waited in the lobby, soaked, quiet, unseen. The hours passed slowly. A nurse finally approached him just before dawn, her expression soft but serious. "She's alive," she said. "She had a concussion and a ruptured spleen, but we caught it in time. She's in recovery now. Do you know her?" "No," he replied honestly. "But I couldn't leave her there." "She's lucky you found her," the nurse whispered. A few more minutes and the sentence didn't need finishing. He finally asked, "What's her name?" The nurse glanced at the chart. Alyssa Hart. "She's 27. Keanu nodded slowly. The name felt familiar, though he couldn't place why. Something about it stirred something deep in his memory. He stayed a little longer, then quietly slipped away, leaving a note with the nurse. "You were not alone. I stayed until help came. If you ever want to talk, I'll be around." He left his initials only, KR, and his contact number. He didn't want thanks. He didn't want recognition. He just wanted her to heal. What he didn't know, what he couldn't possibly know, was that Alyssa Hart was more than just a stranger in a wreck. She was someone connected to his past in a way that would soon turn his quiet world upside down, and when she woke up, the first thing she whispered wasn't, "Where am I?" It was, "Did he survive too?" But she wasn't talking about Keanu. Not yet. The hospital was quieter than most people would expect for such a large building. Everything inside it moved at a strange, slow rhythm. Soft footsteps, hushed voices, the occasional beep from a heart monitor. Keanu sat in his truck outside the emergency entrance, the rain having long since passed, leaving only puddles that shimmered under the dim morning light. His clothes were still damp, his hands stiff from the cold, but none of that mattered. His thoughts were with the woman he had pulled from the wreckage, Alyssa Hart. He kept thinking about her last word before she blacked out, that haunting whisper, "Did he survive too?" It echoed in his mind like a broken note from an unfinished melody. Who was he? Who had been in that car with her? Had someone else been thrown from the vehicle? He had searched around the wreckage but saw no one else. Still, her words planted a seed of unease in him, a sense that something wasn't right. He needed to know more. He wasn't the kind of man to walk away when someone was in pain and not try to understand it. Inside the hospital, Alyssa stirred in her hospital bed. Her head throbbed, her wrist ached, and her ribs felt like someone had dropped bricks on them. The lights above her were soft, but even that was too much for her swollen eyes. She remembered the crash, at least pieces of it. The rain, the deer, the car skidding, the moment the world flipped upside down. And then, him. A voice, calm in the chaos. Hands pulling her from the fire. Strong arms shielding her from heat. She didn't see his face clearly, but his presence had been like an anchor in a storm. Now she was safe. But her heart wasn't. Not yet. A nurse walked in, checking her vitals, adjusting the IV. She smiled kindly and said, "You've been unconscious for nearly 12 hours. We were all worried." Alyssa managed a weak smile. "Did someone bring me in?" The nurse paused, then nodded. "A man. He saved you. Stayed with you until the ambulance came. Followed you here. Waited outside all night. Left a note." She handed Alyssa a folded piece of paper. Alyssa opened it with trembling hands and read the simple words. "You were not alone. I stayed until help came. If you ever want to talk, I'll be around." It was signed only with 2 letters, KR, but those letters sent a wave of recognition through her. Keanu Reeves. It couldn't be. Could it? She had heard that voice before. Years ago, when she was just a teenager, a chance encounter at a film event her father had dragged her to. Keanu had spoken to her like she mattered even though she was shy, even though she had a stutter back then. He made her feel seen, remembered. She had kept that memory like a keepsake, tucked away in her heart. But something else haunted her. The crash wasn't just a random accident. Someone else had been in the car, someone she loved. Her brother, Max. He had just been released from the hospital after months of treatment for a rare illness. They were on their way to pick up medication from a special clinic when the accident happened. She had swerved to avoid a deer, lost control, and everything. After that was a blur. Where was Max now? Had he been thrown from the car? Did he survive? No one had told her anything. Panic clawed its way up her throat. Was anyone else found at the scene? She asked the nurse. The woman looked confused. You were the only one in the car when emergency services arrived. Alyssa shook her head, wincing from the pain. No, my brother was with me. Max. He was right next to me. The nurse's face darkened with concern. I'll check the reports. Meanwhile, Keanu had returned home to his quiet place just outside Los Angeles. A modest property surrounded by trees and quiet. It was a retreat from the noise of the world. Yet that peace now felt hollow. He couldn't stop thinking about Alyssa, about the way her hand had felt in his, cold but clinging to life. There was something deeper about the whole situation that didn't sit right with him. When he closed his eyes, he saw that wreckage again, saw the emptiness of the road around it, saw the fire. If there had been another person, there would have been signs, wouldn't there? But something in her voice, did he survive too? Carried a kind of certainty that couldn't be dismissed. He decided to call the hospital. He didn't identify himself, just asked about Alyssa Hart. He was told she was in stable condition, recovering and awake. That was a relief. But it wasn't enough. Something was pulling at him. It wasn't just guilt or curiosity. It was instinct. Something told him her story wasn't over, that maybe saving her life was just the beginning. At the hospital, Alyssa was growing more distressed. The nurse returned with bad news. There had been no second person found at the crash site. No record of anyone else being there. It didn't make sense. Max had been right beside her. She remembered his voice screaming her name. She remembered reaching for him. She couldn't have imagined that. Unless something darker had happened. Later that evening, a detective arrived. Officer Layla Ramos, a tall woman with sharp eyes and a calm tone. Ms. Hart, she said gently, we've rechecked the scene. No second body. No signs of blood or personal items other than yours. But if you believe someone else was with you, we need to look into it. Alyssa nodded. My brother, Max. He has a medical bracelet. He would have been unconscious if thrown from the car. Officer Ramos made notes. We'll expand the search radius, helicopters, dogs. We'll find him if he's out there. That night, as the hospital hallway lights dimmed and nurses whispered behind glass windows, Keanu returned. He walked in wearing a simple hoodie, cap low on his brow, unnoticed by most. He stood outside Alyssa's room, staring at her through the small window. Her eyes were closed, her breathing steady, but her face was troubled even in rest. He opened the door softly and stepped inside. She stirred, turning her head slowly. Their eyes met. You came back, she whispered. Keanu nodded, his voice soft. You remembered me? She blinked, tears forming. Years ago. Film event. You told me something I've never forgotten. You said, you don't need to be loud to be heard. It changed everything for me. Keanu smiled gently. I remember that event. You had a shy smile and asked if being scared meant you couldn't be strong. Her lip trembled. You said the strongest people are often the quietest. There was a long silence between them. Then she whispered, my brother, he was with me, and now they can't find him. Keanu's expression changed. The same concern he had been feeling now confirmed by her words. I believe you, he said, and I'm going to help you find him. Why? She asked, voice cracking. He paused. Because sometimes the universe puts people in front of us for a reason, and maybe saving you wasn't the end of that reason. As he gently took her hand again, something shifted between them. Two strangers pulled together by fate, now tethered by something far deeper. Behind Alyssa's eyes was a storm of memory and worry, and in Keanu's heart, a new sense of purpose, took root. What neither of them knew, what waited just beyond the shadows, was that Max wasn't lost in the woods or lying hurt somewhere. Max had been taken, and whoever had taken him didn't want him to be found. Not yet. Not until something much darker was finished. The morning after Keanu's quiet return to the hospital, Los Angeles woke slowly under a haze of thick fog, like the world itself wasn't ready to face what the day would bring. In room 417, Alyssa Hart sat upright in her bed, her body still wrapped in bruises, and her soul even more so. Her eyes remained fixed on the window, though they saw nothing beyond. The frost-tinted glass. Inside her head, memories blurred and sharpened with no clear rhythm. The accident replayed again and again. The swerve, the scream, the crushing silence, and then that flicker of light that came not from the outside world, but from the voice that reached into her darkness. Keanu's voice. Calm. Warm. Real. But, now despite the comfort of that memory, her heart was trapped in a cage of fear and confusion because her brother was missing, and no one seemed to believe he had ever been there. The absence of his name on any hospital record, the lack of a second seatbelt imprint, and the authorities' growing suspicion that trauma had twisted her memory. All of it was starting to make her question her own mind. But not Keanu. He had seen too much in his life to dismiss intuition, especially when it came from someone whose pain was honest. There was something in her trembling voice, in the desperate certainty she held even through exhaustion and injury, that reminded him of stories he had heard from others during the darkest points in his life. Trauma doesn't always follow rules. Sometimes the truth looks irrational to people who haven't felt it, and Keanu had lived long enough to know the world often tried to bury the inconvenient truth under piles of well-meaning doubt. So he returned that morning, this time holding a brown paper bag with 2 breakfast sandwiches, a thermos of chamomile tea, and a stack of papers he had printed after staying up all night. Alyssa looked up when he entered, her face lighting up with surprise followed by tears she didn't want to cry but couldn't stop. "You came back?" she said again, her voice barely above a whisper. Keanu set the bag down and pulled a chair to her bedside. "I told you I would." Then, before she could respond, he gently unwrapped one of the sandwiches and offered it to her. "You haven't eaten, and your body needs strength if we're going to look for answers." She accepted it with shaking hands, gratitude showing in every movement. He didn't speak as she ate. He just let her feel safe. That was what she needed most. When she had eaten enough to take a breath, he reached into his jacket and pulled out the papers, maps of the crash area, satellite images, emergency reports. "I went back to the site after they cleared the scene," he began. "Walked the perimeter, searched the trees, found broken branches at a point northeast of the crash that didn't match the rest of the damage. They weren't from your car rolling. They were snapped off higher up, as if something or someone had gone flying through them." Alyssa's hand gripped the blanket. "You found something?" Keanu nodded. "There was no blood, no body. But I found this," he said, sliding a small object across the tray table. It was a hospital bracelet, cracked, scratched, but the name was still visible. Max Hart. Alyssa gasped, her fingers trembling as she picked it up. Tears flooded her eyes. "That's his. That's my brother's." Keanu leaned forward. "They missed it. The emergency crew probably didn't search far enough. The terrain is steep and rough. I think he was thrown further than they expected, and by the time they arrived, the fire and smoke had masked the scent if dogs were used." Alyssa nodded, her voice choked. "But where is he now?" Keanu hesitated. "That's where things get stranger, because I found fresh tire marks leading away from that same area. They weren't from emergency vehicles. They were wider, heavier like a truck, and they were deep. Someone drove in after the crash, not before. And they left with something heavy in the back." Alyssa's heart stopped for a second. "Someone took him." Keanu's voice was calm but firm. "I think so, and I think they knew who he was." She shook her head. "But why? He's just He's just my brother. He's sick. He's been sick most of his life. Why would anyone want to take him? Keanu leaned back, thinking, and then said, "What kind of illness did Max have?" She exhaled slowly. "Immune system disorder. Genetic. It's rare. Doctors said his blood chemistry was unusual, which is why certain medications didn't work on him. He was in a clinical trial last year with a private biotech lab. They took samples, said his cells showed resistance to things." Her voice trailed off as realization settled in her eyes. Keanu spoke carefully. "I know some people in the biotech world, some of them very private, and not all of them are good. If your brother had something unique in his biology, something valuable." Alyssa covered her mouth with her hand. Oh God. Her mind raced back to the day before the accident, when she noticed a black vehicle following them after they left the pharmacy. She thought it was coincidence. But now, Keanu stood. "We need to talk to Officer Ramos again, and I want you to meet someone, an old friend of mine who works in private intelligence. He owes me a favor. If someone took Max, it's not going to be the police who find him. It's going to be us." For the first time since waking up, Alyssa felt something stronger than fear. Hope. Fragile, yes, but alive. She nodded, her jaw set with new determination. "Then let's find him." Later that evening, in a secluded office outside Santa Monica, a man named Sam Dyer watched surveillance footage on a series of monitors. The room was dark, lit only by the glow of multiple screens showing footage from various gas stations, highways, and border checkpoints. He had been tracking biotech-related abductions for nearly a decade. Most of the time, the trail went cold. But this time, he had a lead. A black unmarked van with no license plates, seen leaving a remote area less than 2 miles from a reported crash site. A van that didn't belong to any emergency or rescue service. He paused the frame, zoomed in. On the side panel, near the back, barely visible under the mud, was a faded logo. Apex Genetics. A name he hadn't heard in years. A name that had been blacklisted by international health agencies for illegal experimentation. Sam picked up his phone. "Keanu," he said when the call connected. "You're going to want to see what I just found." The next morning, Keanu and Alyssa met Sam in a discreet apartment above a bookstore that doubled as a tech surveillance nest. Alyssa sat frozen as she stared at the image of the van on the screen. "That's them," she whispered. "That's the same one I saw outside the clinic last week. They followed us." Her voice cracked and her hands balled into fists. "They knew we'd crash, or maybe they made it happen." Keanu stepped forward, his eyes on Sam. "Can we track it?" Sam nodded. "It went through an agricultural checkpoint 3 hours after the crash, then it disappeared. But if they're using Apex's old routes, I have a guess where they took him. There's an abandoned facility in the Mojave Desert. Off-grid. Quiet. No one goes near it anymore because it's supposedly radioactive." Alyssa's eyes widened. "Are we going there?" Keanu didn't hesitate. "We're going tonight." Sam handed Keanu a file. "This won't be a rescue mission. This is going to be dangerous. There's no law out there. Only fences, guards, and secrets they've spent years burying." Keanu looked at Alyssa, whose face was pale but resolute. "I've faced danger before," he said. "But this time, I'm not doing it for a role. I'm doing it because someone's life depends on it." Outside, the sky turned dark again. Storm clouds gathered for the second time in a week. But this time, the storm wasn't coming from above. It was coming from within. And Keanu Reeves, the man known for walking quietly through life, was about to make noise in the places that had lived too long in silence. And deep inside that hidden desert facility, Mac's heart opened his eyes, not to freedom but to cold lights, humming machines, and voices that didn't speak like doctors, but like hunters. The desert was a place of secrets. It held memories under its sand, buried bones beneath its silence, and stories whispered only by the wind. As the sun disappeared behind a curtain of crimson clouds, Keanu Reeves drove with steady hands and steady breath across a narrow, dust-covered road that led toward a location no GPS dared to name. The Mojave stretched out around them in all directions, endless and still, yet something in the air felt restless, as if the ground itself knew they were getting close to something dark. Alyssa sat beside him, her wrist wrapped in a new splint, her gaze locked on the growing shadow in the distance. Behind them, Sam Dyer followed in a black SUV filled with equipment, drones, cameras, a satellite uplink, and gear that once belonged to retired agents and rogue journalists. This wasn't an investigation anymore, this was a rescue. They reached a barbed wire fence around midnight. It wasn't marked, but it didn't need to be. The ground had changed. No wildlife sounds. No breeze, just a heavy, unnatural quiet. Beyond the fence stood what looked like an old, decommissioned warehouse made of rusted metal and forgotten steel. But the warmth in its windows betrayed the lie. Something was alive in there. Something that didn't want to be found. Keanu pulled, the truck behind a rocky outcrop, killing the engine. "This is it," he said calmly. Alyssa's heart pounded in her chest. She had imagined this moment 100 times, finding the place, confronting the people who had taken her brother. But now that it was real, the fear felt different. Sharper. Colder. Yet she didn't retreat. She only nodded and followed Keanu. Out into the night, Sam unpacked a small drone, sent it silently into the air, and guided it toward the facility. The screen on his tablet displayed heat signatures, guards moving in predictable patrols, 2 at the front entrance, 1 near the rear, and 3 inside. The image of a body restrained to a metal bed appeared on screen, still breathing. "There," Alyssa whispered, her hand flying to her mouth. "That's Max." The camera confirmed it. The same frame, same hair, same scar on the chin. Max. Heart was alive, but barely. Monitors beeped beside him. Wires ran from his arms, fluids were being pumped into him. A machine blinked behind his head, tracking something the screen didn't explain. "They're experimenting," Sam murmured. "Harvesting samples, monitoring reactions. Apex never closed. They just went underground." Keanu's jaw tightened. His fingers brushed the edge of a vest he had worn in a film once, repurposed now with real armor. He looked at Sam. "Can we cut power?" Sam nodded. 15 minutes, I'll jam their signal, disrupt the security system, and create a 5-minute blackout. But you'll have to get him out fast. Once the power goes, their backup generator will kick in, then they'll lock everything down." Keanu turned to Alyssa. "Stay with Sam. I need you safe." But Alyssa stepped forward. "I'm going in." He hesitated. "It's not safe." She looked him in the eye. "He's my brother." He didn't argue after that. They waited in silence for the countdown. At 0, the desert flickered. The warehouse lights blinked out. Red emergency lights flashed briefly and died. In the confusion, Keanu moved like a shadow, his steps soft, his focus sharp. Alyssa followed close behind. They entered through a side door Sam had unlocked remotely. Inside, the air smelled of chemicals and steel. Down a narrow hallway, 2 guards rushed in the opposite direction, distracted by the blackout. Keanu motioned for silence and crept forward, heart steady, mind locked on a single goal: get Max out. They reached the room just as the generator rumbled back to life. Lights snapped on. Alarms began to hum. And then they saw him. Max, strapped to a table, eyes half open, lips cracked from dehydration. "Max!" Alyssa rushed to his side, unbuckling straps with shaking hands. He blinked, confused. "Alyssa, I thought you died." She kissed his forehead. "No, I'm here. You're safe now." Keanu checked the door. Footsteps approached. "We've got maybe 60 seconds, he said. Suddenly, a voice boomed over a speaker, deep, cold, calculated. "Whoever you are, you've made a terrible mistake. That boy is property of Apex." Keanu turned toward the camera, staring directly into it. "He's not your property, and we're not leaving him behind." The voice responded, You can't save him. His cells are not stable. Without our treatments, he won't survive the night. Alyssa froze. What does he mean? Max groaned. They told me. My blood. It changes under stress. They said I'm evolving. They said my body might be the key to regenerating human tissue. He winced in pain. But I didn't want this. They didn't ask. They took me. Keanu hoisted him into his arms. We'll figure it out later. Right now we run. They burst into the hallway just as two guards appeared. One lunged forward, but Keanu swung with force, sending him sprawling. The second raised a taser, but Alyssa slammed a fire extinguisher into his side, knocking him unconscious. They raced down the corridor, alarms blaring behind them. At the door, Sam opened it remotely, shouting over the comms, "Hurry! The front gate's opening. Someone's coming in." Outside, headlights approached. Two black vehicles. Backup had arrived. Keanu loaded Max into the truck while Sam covered them with a drone-mounted spotlight that blinded the guards. Alyssa climbed in beside her brother, cradling his head as he gasped for air. "We're going to get you out," she whispered. "You're going to be okay." Tires screeched. Engines roared. The truck tore away from the warehouse as gunshots rang out in the night. Dust kicked up behind them as they vanished into the desert, wind howling past the windows. An hour later, they reached a medical safe house operated by one of Sam's old contacts. Max was stabilized, fluids replaced, vital signs normalized, but his condition remained uncertain. "He needs specialized care," the doctor said, "and the people who want him won't stop. You need to disappear for a while." Alyssa sat beside her brother, tears falling onto his shoulder. "You held on," she whispered. "You didn't give up." Max looked at her and tried to smile. "You didn't either." Outside, Keanu stood under the moonlight, staring into the sky. He had acted on instinct, again, had followed a feeling that something wasn't right, and now he had stepped into something larger than he ever expected. This wasn't just about a rescue. This was about a truth that had been buried, a system that preyed on the vulnerable, and a family caught in the middle of it all. And far away, in a sleek boardroom in a city tower, a man in a suit watched footage from the desert facility. His expression was unreadable, but his voice was icy when he spoke into the phone. "Keanu Reeves just declared war on Apex." The voice on the other end replied, "Then it's time we show him what that means." The safe house sat hidden at the edge of an abandoned mining town, a place lost to time and swallowed by dust. No signs pointed there. No maps named it. The only sounds were the rustling of wind through broken fences and the soft hum of generators, tucked beneath camouflaged tarps. The structure itself had once been a caretaker's lodge, but now it served a higher purpose: quiet salvation. Inside, Max's heart rested on a narrow cot, his breathing steadier than it had been in days. His face had regained a hint of color, and though exhaustion hung on him like wet cloth, the panic in his eyes had faded. Beside him, Alyssa stayed close, never more than a foot away, her fingers interlaced with his like she was afraid that letting go would somehow erase him. But deep inside, worry gnawed at her. The doctor said he was stable, but even they didn't understand the complexity of what Apex had done to his body. His blood readings didn't match anything they had seen before. Oxygen saturation higher than average. Rapid cellular repair, immune markers unlike anything on medical record. It wasn't just illness he had survived. It was transformation. Keanu stood on the porch, arms folded, his eyes scanning the horizon. His mind wasn't at rest. Since the night of the rescue, he hadn't slept much. The footage they had seen, the guards' behavior, the surveillance voice, it all pointed to one conclusion. Apex wasn't just conducting illegal experiments, they were preparing something. And Max wasn't the first. He had gone to Sam's van, loaded with data storage and analysis tools, and together they had decrypted files pulled from the stolen security feeds, patient logs, genetic profiles, shipment manifests, and a list, code names, not real names, but enough to show that over 50 individuals had passed through Apex's underground labs in the past 7 years. Less than half were accounted for. Some had vanished, Others were listed as transferred. No medical release forms, no family notifications. Just silence. Keanu placed the printed sheets down slowly. "This isn't just about Max," he said quietly to Sam. "This is a machine. They're harvesting people like resources." Sam nodded. The lines on his face hardened by years of exposure to secrets people weren't supposed to know. "And they're protected," he added. "Black funding, offshore labs, ex-military security. We can't touch them with laws. Only with light. And right now we've got just enough to make them flinch but not fall." Inside, Alyssa overheard the conversation and joined them. "So what do we do?" Her voice trembled but carried steel underneath. "Do we wait until they come for him again? Because they will. You saw how far they were willing to go." Her eyes burned as she looked at both men. "They're not going to stop." Keanu stepped forward, placing a hand on her shoulder. "No, they're not. Which means we take the fight to them. We expose everything, from the labs to the names to the victims they left behind. If we make enough noise, they'll lose the shadows they hide behind." Sam hesitated. "It won't be easy. And once we go public, they'll come after us hard." Keanu didn't blink. "They already are." That night, the three of them sat in front of a wall of monitors. They began building a digital package, video evidence, patient records, financial data showing the pipeline between Apex and certain corrupt biotech investors. It wasn't perfect. Some files were incomplete, some details couldn't be verified. But it was enough to make people ask questions. And sometimes, the right question in the wrong place could bring everything down. They created backup drives, encrypted copies. One to send to the press, another to send to regulators overseas, and a third to be hand-delivered by someone they trusted. They even prepared a public video statement, with Alyssa sharing her story. It was raw, heartbreaking, but brave. She spoke not just for her brother, but for everyone who never got to be heard. By dawn, the plan was ready, but as always, the enemy moved first. Just after sunrise, while Alyssa was resting beside Max and Sam, was prepping a secure signal to broadcast the video, Keanu stepped outside for air. The moment he did, something shifted. The birds stopped chirping. A faint humming cut through the stillness, and from the distant road he saw them, 3 black SUVs kicking up a trail of dust as they moved fast across the open desert. No lights, no plates, no warning. "They found us," he muttered under his breath. He rushed inside. "Go, now. We're compromised." Sam's face paled. "But how? We've been off-grid." Keanu grabbed his gear. "Doesn't matter. We have 5 minutes, maybe less. Get Max out the back, take the second route. I'll hold them here." Alyssa stood, shaking. "No. We stay together." Keanu turned, his voice firm. "Alyssa, this isn't the time. They're not coming to talk. They're coming to clean up." He handed her a small flash drive. "This is everything. If they get this, it's over. Get to the extraction point. Sam knows the way." She looked like she was about to argue, but then she saw something in his eyes. An old pain, shaped like sacrifice. She nodded slowly, kissed his cheek, and whispered, "Please come back." Then she disappeared into the shadows with her brother and Sam, slipping out a hatch that led to the canyon path. Keanu stayed behind. When the vehicles arrived, the first guard to step out was tall, built like a machine, his face covered by a tactical mask. Behind him were 5 others, armed, coordinated, silent. They didn't ask questions. They moved toward the door with the kind of confidence that came from knowing people rarely fought back. But Keanu Reeves wasn't most people. He stood tall in the doorway, hands at his sides, gaze unwavering. "You've made a mistake," one of the guards said. Keanu didn't move. "So have you." The fight was swift and brutal. They came at him in pairs, but he moved like water, years of training rising from muscle memory. He disarmed the first attacker with a twist of the wrist, dropped the second with a blow to the throat. He moved through them not like a man outnumbered, but like a storm through a field. But even storms wear down. He took a hit to the ribs, Another to the shoulder. He fell once, got up, kept going. When the dust finally settled, 3 men were on the ground, groaning. The rest had fled. But the last one wasn't there to fight. He was there to deliver a message. Bruised but standing, he looked Keanu in the eye and said, "You think you're saving that boy, but you have no idea what he is. He's not just unique, he's dangerous. And you're going to regret this." Keanu narrowed his eyes. "The only thing I regret is not stopping you sooner." The man turned and vanished into the dust. When Sam returned with a van, they loaded Keanu into the back. He was bleeding, barely, conscious but alive. Alyssa sobbed at the sight of him cradling his head as Sam drove through the winding desert. "You stayed," she whispered. His voice cracked as he spoke. "I told you. I always keep my word." But as they sped away, none of them realized that far beyond the desert, in a city tower where silence and power ruled, Apex had already begun the next phase. And in a hidden chamber, a man watched Max's medical readings on a screen and smiled. "He's awakening," the man whispered to no one. "We gave him the spark. They just gave him the reason." The van drove for hours under a blanket of silence. The desert behind them seemed like a half-forgotten battlefield. Alyssa sat beside Keanu, who drifted in and out of consciousness, his head resting against the cold metal wall, a dark patch of blood soaking through the side of his shirt. His breathing was uneven, but steady enough to hold on. Across from them, Max lay on a stretcher, a blanket covering his body, his expression distant, haunted but awake. The color in his face was returning slowly, though there was something different in his eyes, like they were seeing more than just the world outside. They were seeing something within, something unlocked. Sam drove with both hands clenched on the wheel, eyes flicking to the rearview mirror, knowing that at any moment a drone could appear or a satellite could pick them up. There were no guarantees now, only decisions. And theirs had already been made. They wouldn't run. They would reveal the truth, even if it came at a cost. They arrived just before dawn at an old monastery nestled deep within the foothills, surrounded by forest and fog, a place that didn't exist on any modern database. It had been abandoned for decades, but Sam's contacts had converted it into a refuge, a safe house for whistleblowers and fugitives seeking to expose the shadows. There was no electricity, only candlelight and silence. The monks had left, but their spirit remained, and with it a strange peace. Keanu was brought inside, laid gently on a makeshift cot, his wounds cleaned and wrapped by a medic from Sam's network. Alyssa sat at his side, holding his hand, whispering to him stories about the nights he saved her life. Twice now. First, from the flames, and then from despair. He listened, though his eyes remained closed, his chest rising and falling with slow determination. Outside, Thesky began to shift from black to blue, and with it came a weight, because the moment had arrived. Sam prepared the data package on a small encrypted laptop, setting up a burst transmission satellite feed. This wouldn't be a slow leak to journalists. It would be a detonation, a press release sent to thousands of independent watchdogs, health, commissions, reporters, and human rights organizations around the world. Video footage, patient testimonies, Apex's hidden lab coordinates, anonymous statements from former employees, medical reports from missing people. Everything they had uncovered was about to be launched like a truth bomb into the heart of a system that had grown comfortable in its invisibility. Alyssa stood in front of the camera, her hair a tangled mess, face still bruised, eyes red but fierce. She didn't read a script. She spoke from the rawest part of her being. "My name is Alyssa Hart. My brother Max was taken by a company called Apex Genetics. They experimented on him without consent. They buried the evidence. They paid off officials. And they're still doing it. I'm here today because one man believed me. One man followed his heart and pulled me out of a wreck when no one else even knew I was gone. And now we're all pulling others out of their wrecks by telling the truth." She paused, looked at the camera and whispered, If you're watching this, don't stay silent. Don't let them disappear, the next child, the next brother, the next sister. Then Sam hit the button. Within seconds, their message began spreading, like fire through dry brush, mirrored, downloaded, reposted by bots and bloggers, echoed by underground networks and curious citizens. By sunrise, hashtags began trending. Expose Pex. Max Heart Truth. A few mainstream journalists tried to dismiss it, but the evidence was overwhelming. Medical charts signed by real doctors, video files stamped with timestamps and coordinates, security footage from the lab. The damage was done. Apex's doors wouldn't remain sealed anymore, but it wasn't over. Not yet, because far away, in a dark room lit by sterile lights, Apex's director watched the live coverage. His face was calm, unreadable, but his words cut like ice. Activate protocol Eclipse. Erase everything, clean the records, scrub the servers, and retrieve the asset, whatever it takes. The men around him hesitated. Sir, the public is already watching. We can't risk exposure. The director narrowed his eyes. Then we give them a spectacle. If they want a villain, let's become one they'll never forget. Back at the monastery, a storm was coming. Drones flew low over the treetops. A jamming signal blocked their satellite feed. And then came the rumble of black helicopters, silent but hungry. The safe house wasn't just a refuge anymore. It had become a target. Sam grabbed the emergency radio. They're here. Keanu sat up slowly, pain flashing across his face, but resolve in his eyes. Get Max and Alyssa out through the well tunnel. It'll take you to the creek. There's a boat waiting. Go. Alyssa shook her head, tears rising. Not without you. He reached out and touched her hand, a soft smile in his eyes. I'll buy you time. Keanu, she said, her voice breaking. Don't do this alone. He looked at her and whispered, I'm not alone. I've got you. Then, before she could say another word, he kissed her forehead, rose to his feet, and limped toward the outer gate. As helicopters descended, men in tactical gear dropped into the courtyard. But instead of hiding, Keanu stepped forward, unarmed, visible, calm. They shouted for him to get down. He raised his hand slowly, but spoke first. You want me? Here I am. But the world's already seen you. The masks are off. The truth is, out. A soldier raised his weapon, but before he could fire, something happened. The ground shook. Inside the tunnel, Max suddenly convulsed. His body arched as heat poured off his skin. His eyes glowed faintly, veins lit with some unnatural light. Alyssa cried out, trying to hold him, but he whispered, I'm not sick anymore. His body pulsed with energy, and then silence. Outside, every device Apex carried, drones, weapons, comms, suddenly failed. Sparks burst from their earpieces. Lights shorted out, their vision blurred. The wind picked up, unnaturally strong, and in the middle of it all, Keanu stood like a lighthouse, in a storm. From behind the gate, Max stepped forward, not the weak, frail boy from before, but something new, not monstrous, not inhuman, but elevated, powerful. His voice was clear. You hurt people like me because you're afraid. But we're not weapons. We're not your property. And you will not hurt anyone else. Then the sky went white. Later, no one could explain what had happened. Not clearly. Footage was corrupted. Memory cards wiped. Soldiers said they saw a burst of light and then lost consciousness. When they awoke, the facility was gone. No trace of the safe house, no trace of Max, no trace of Keanu. Only a single card left behind, a memory chip. On it, a single sentence appeared when plugged into any device. Truth is the only cure for darkness. Weeks later, Apex's headquarters were raided by international agencies. Lawsuits filed. Whistleblowers emerged. Max and Alyssa vanished from public view, protected and hidden. Their lives finally their own. And as for Keanu, no one knew where he had gone. Some say he returned to his quiet life. Some say he's still out there watching, protecting those the world forgets. But one thing became legend. On a stormy night, a woman nearly died in a burning car, and the man who pulled her from the flames didn't just save her life. He saved the truth, and nothing would ever be the same again.